It's time now for Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join News Director Paul David and News Editor Philip Catafamo as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics in Yavapai County that affect all our lives. And now here's today's Countywide.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. I'd like to thank you for joining me. On today's show, we're talking heat-related illness, and my guest over the phone today is Prescott Fire Spokesman Conrad Jackson. Conrad, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me.
Good day, Philip. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
As we all know, it is starting to, the summer weather is starting to creep into the state of Arizona. I know that we're starting to feel it here up in Yavapai County. I know down in Phoenix it's starting to maybe eclipse the 100s. And with some of the COVID-19 restrictions starting to be lifted, a lot of people are going to be finding their way outside. So with the outside comes the heat, and we wanted to talk a little bit about, preventing a heat-related illness. So I want to start out with this. What is a heat-related illness, Conrad?
Well, you're actually talking about a kind of a progression when you're talking about a heat-related illness. And initially, when you're out there hiking, you're going to exert yourself. Your body temperature is going to rise. Your body's going to do its normal thing, starting to sweat to cool itself back down. And that's pretty normal. That's just a level of exertion. When you start getting beyond the body's capacity to maintain an appropriate body temperature, things start changing. And it kind of goes through a progression. First, people will generally experience heat cramps, which most people know are kind of like a pain or a spasm. They might even start feeling lightheaded. And now you're getting into some bigger warning signs. If you're starting to feel lightheaded or even faint, then you're starting to transition into the next stage, which is heat exhaustion. And when you have heat exhaustion, your body's still trying to compensate for all that exertion that you're doing, and that temperature's, your internal temperature's rising and rising and rising, and it's sweating heavily. Your heart rate's going to go up, your respiratory rate's going to go up. If you get to the point that either due to the level of your exertion or the temperatures outside, or a combination of the two, just doing too much in too high a temperature, your body's going to have a breakover point, and that's usually about 104 degrees. And that number might sound familiar to a lot of folks who have kids and know how dangerous fevers can get. Your body's not designed to be running at that temperature. But when you start maintaining a temperature in excess of 104, you start having organ failure. Then things start breaking down in your system. So you start running the risk of causing permanent organ damage as well as brain damage. And we usually refer to that as heat stroke. And when you get somebody who's at the heat stroke level and their body is now maintained at that temperature above 104 degrees, you start seeing all kinds of signs and symptoms that are associated with that. They'll have an altered level of consciousness. They just the things, maybe if you're with them, that are coming out of their mouth don't make sense. They're incoherent. Some other things we see with heat stroke are actually where your body has been sweating up until that point. Your body starts failing to compensate, and it'll actually stop sweating. An individual might start experiencing nausea or even vomiting. Mm-hmm. Their skin, because now they are not sweating and cooling naturally anymore, will start getting flushed and bright red. Their respiratory rate will be very pronounced. Their heart rate will be just through the roof. The individual themselves, if they haven't lost consciousness, may be complaining of just having a throbbing headache, which makes sense because they're probably really dehydrated at that point, and their pulse is just pounding. And then ultimately, you can also see an absolute loss of consciousness. That individual that you're with, if they've overexerted themselves, it may go down on you and be out of commission. And we even see seizure activity at that point because you basically cooked your brain, and you start going into febrile seizures. So the thing we've got to watch out for is heat exhaustion is your body warning you that, we've gone too far, we've done a little too much. You need to stop what you're doing at that point and back off because you don't want it to progress to heat stroke. Because if you progress to heat stroke, you run the risk of dying and permanent organ failure at a minimum. So it's a real fine line to recognize when you got those warning signs of feeling lightheaded or just feeling extra thirsty and things like that, or just profoundly sweating. Like, well, I might need to step back and cool down some. And that's the key thing is you need to remove yourself and get out of that position so you don't transition from the heat exhaustion to heat stroke. And it kind of a rule of thumb, we tell people that, if you start feeling not yourself and you have the wherewithal to back off your activity level, get in the shade and cool down and things like that, give it about a 20 to 30-minute window. If you are still feeling discombobulated and you've not regained your ability to sweat and such, then you really should seek out your physician or 911 and get yourself to a hospital for evaluation. You may need IVs to get your fluid levels back up and be actively cooled to get out of that heat stroke condition and back to a normal state.
Yeah, it seems like an extremely scary and dangerous thing to just, a fun trip out on the trail turns into an entire hospital visit if you don't take the proper precautions. And I think we should get into those proper precautions, as you mentioned sort of the difference between a heat stroke and heat exhaustion, and then some of the earlier signs of a heat-related illness more attuned to, heat exhaustion and then going into heat stroke. So before I even decide to go out to the trail, what is the first thing I should do before going outside?
Well, there's a whole bunch of preventive things that we should be thinking about before we go outside. Are you dressed appropriately for it? So you're wearing lightweight clothing that's brightly colored, because we don't want to wear dark clothes because those are just going to absorb extra heat, and loose fitting, so your body's natural perspiration can help cool the fabric and help keep you cool. You want to protect your skin in general, so you should be using at least an SPF 15 or better. And then you should, if you're going to be out and being active, you really ought to be reapplying that every couple hours. You should be staying hydrated, so you should be planning ahead that you drank a lot of water prior to going and doing whatever this activity is, as well as maintaining your fluid levels by bringing adequate water for you, because you're going to start sweating. It's the summer. It's Arizona. You're going to sweat. So make sure you're staying hydrated. Other things, you should pay attention to what kind of medications do you take. Certain medications do not go well with high levels of physical exertion, especially out in the heat. A lot of folks are on diuretics, and a lot of folks are on beta blockers, which help, especially for high blood pressure, help kind of limit and control your blood pressure. But that also puts you at a disadvantage, because your normal compensatory mechanisms that your body would use when you start exerting yourself, the chemical in that beta blocker will limit its ability to do that. So you're at a higher risk factor. So you should really be evaluating, if you're on diuretics and beta blockers, just how active and how much you're going to go out there and do. There's a couple of obvious ones. Depending on what your activity is, you're going to go for a hike. If it's going to be a hot day, try to plan it out so you're not hitting the peak temperatures of the day. Go out and do it in the morning. Go and catch it in the evening. Obviously paying attention to your timing, that you're going to have adequate time to make it back before it gets dark. One that kind of sneaks up on people is, the weather starts turning good like it is right now, and then everybody wants to get out and about. And maybe they haven't been out and about for 6 months. So what's your fitness level right now? Have you slacked off for the last 6 months, and as a result, you're not in the peak condition that you were back in August or September? And so if you go out and do the same hike that you would have done back in August or September as your first go-get-'em, you're probably going to overextend yourself because you're not at that same performance level. So you really should be kind of getting acclimated to your level of activity that to get back to where you once were. And speaking of getting acclimated, you really should be getting accustomed to the temperatures in general. Spending a little bit more time each time outside getting a feel for the heat and letting your body respond appropriately. And it's kind of a weird thing. When I used to be on a hot shot crew and we would do fires down in the desert, we would actually turn off the AC unit in the hot shot buggies as we were driving down into the desert, so we could kind of pre-warm ourselves up and just kind of get used to operating in a hotter climate. And so you should be doing the same, kind of get used to being out in the heat. Some other things you really should be thinking about, whether or not you're going to do this alone. As I've spoken on many occasions, we get much better results if something goes awry on people's hikes or activities if they have company. And usually we recommend 3 people. That way, if something goes wrong, and that it can be anything from a heat-related incident to somebody twisting an ankle or whatever, you can have one individual stay with the injured party and the other person can go seek help. So that's something we just highly encourage. It's just a smart way to go out and be active.
Well, I mean, it seems like there are a lot of precautions that need to be taken before you go outside, as you mentioned, making sure that if you've been dealing with that COVID-19, I know I have, that making sure that you don't rush out to the trails immediately, make sure you drink a lot of water. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we've got a lot more to talk about heat-related illnesses with Spokesman Conrad Jackson of Prescott Fire. Countywide will be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle, get Gettles.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
So I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born, and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Orkin has pest control down to a science.
When your business chooses Orkin's Precision Protection Program, you get a tailored pest control program for your specific industry and environment.
Your business can benefit from over a century of experience, training, and scientific knowledge that define the Orkin man.
Maximum protection, minimum exposure, backed by one of the industry's most comprehensive guarantees.
Choose your locally owned and operated Northern Arizona Orkin and get more than an exterminator. Get an expert.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. On today's show, we are talking heat-related illness, and my guest over the phone today, because COVID-19 is unfortunately still going on, is Prescott Fire spokesman Conrad Jackson. In the first segment, we talked about heat illnesses, the difference between heat stroke, heat exhaustion, some of the early signs, and what you should do to take precautions before you even think about going out on the trail or outside in general. Essential workers. We know there are a lot of essential workers who are working outdoors and are going to start to feel the effects of the heat. Like I mentioned early on, the summer weather is here. What steps can people who work outdoors take to prevent any sort of heat-related issues?
Well, a lot of that's going to depend on what the type of work that individual is doing. So if they're working in, well, let's just start baseline with their clothing. Now, we hit on it earlier as far as wearing lightweight clothing that's loose-fitting and light in color. Obviously, we didn't talk anything about what they should be wearing on their head. So some kind of hat that's going to have a decent brim on it, that's going to afford some level of ventilation. So different styles of hats will have little air vent holes that allow some airflow. Those are super important to kind of keep that sun off your face and off your back, because once you start damaging that skin, then the skin's ability to function properly and do the evaporative cooling from the perspiration, it becomes hindered as you're burning and getting that sunburn. So we don't want to have sunburn. That's why we also mentioned making sure that folks are wearing sunblock in excess of an SPF 15, and that's going to apply for any essential worker as well. And they got to think about their long-term health. You know, on the day-to-day basis, they don't want to get overheated, but in the long term, they also want to avoid getting skin cancer. So, you know, if they're an essential worker that their job is working outdoors, exposed on a daily basis, they need to be taking those extra precautions. Some folks can also purchase, rather than going with the sunblock on a short-sleeved shirt, you can buy higher quality fabrics that ventilate well, and you can do it in a long sleeve, and then you reap all the benefits of getting all the perspiration, and then you also have, you know, a covering for your skin that's even better than having sunblock on. So that's good. Now, if you're working in a fixed position, say like I'm doing right now, digging fence posts to put up a fence, you know, if you have no choice and you have to work in that peak period of the day, you know, there's alternatives like putting up a pop-up canopy or something that's going to help provide that shade to help protect you. But that's only effective if you can keep it in that one area where you're going to be working. If you're working on a tractor or something like that, you'd be mindful of either renting or using a tractor that's got some kind of canopy, or maybe potentially you could jury-rig something up that would help keep that sun off you as you were going around. And then, you know, we can't overstress the aspect of hydration. So if you start feeling thirsty, you're already behind the curve. You're already probably 2% body fluid loss at that point. So you want to pre-hydrate. And along the same lines, if you're going to be exerting, this be a worker or even a hiker or some other physical activity like, you know, you're mountain biking or something like that, you need to consider not just water, but the potential of using some kind of sports drink, because the sports drinks are going to give you some electrolytes to work with. Because as a part of that perspiration process, we all know you're going to lose a lot of salt in that process too. So those sports drinks, with a nice mix of, you know, maybe one sports drink and then 2 bottles of water and then back to a sports drink, it kind of helps keep your electrolytes balanced as you're losing those salts. And so anybody who's out being active and sweating a lot needs to be thinking about augmenting what they're drinking with a little bit of that sports drink.
Now, what if I'm out on the trail? I'm out there with my buddies, and we're going on the trail, and one of them starts to experience the early signs of a heat-related illness, and maybe we push through it a little bit further, and it starts getting worse. So, what is the first aid treatment for a heat stroke to at least slow down the process so that we can wait for first responders? What is that first aid treatment early on?
Okay, so what we had. The big thing that's going on is the temperature issue, right? So we want to try to get that person's body temperature back down. Now, as they were starting to become a little exerted, they should have been drinking lots more water. Mm-hmm. When you start getting to that breakover point where they're behaving irrationally or just, you know, they can't go on or whatever the things that are indicating to you, like, oh, my God, my friend's gone, you know, he's gone past the point of heat exhaustion. I'm worried that he's got heat stroke. We need to start really doing some active cooling. Around here in Arizona, we don't have opportunities to really take somebody down to a creek or river. If you happen to be hiking in an area where that's an option, that's something where you could take them down, have them put their feet in the water, and then you could utilize that water to actually wet their clothing and up that evaporation rate on their clothes. So that's where water starts becoming useful for cooling the body for evaporation. If you happen to have access to ice packs, or you've been dragging along an ice chest or something like that, and you can make little cool packs that can go in their armpits, the back of their neck, or their groin, that's also a way that you can start actively trying to cool that person down. And again, if they don't start feeling better within 20 to 30 minutes, things have progressed too far. So that's what you're watching out for, is that little half-hour window of, is my buddy getting better or are things getting worse? And, start making your plan as you're evaluating it, like, how are we going to get out of here at this point? Is this something where medical crews are going to be able to get into us? Are we going to have to fly out? What kind of time frames are going to be involved with hiking back out?
We're going to take another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about pets and continue our conversation with heat-related illnesses and preventing them. When we come back, right here on Countywide, don't go anywhere.
Starting in the late 1920s, Grandpa Gettle and his brothers laid the groundwork for what would become a family legacy. Almost 100 years and 100 patents later, Gettle's High Desert Mechanical continues to raise the bar of quality heating, cooling, and plumbing products and services in the Verde Valley.
Call Gettle's High Desert Mechanical, Heating, Air Conditioning, and Plumbing at 567-2200 or online at GettlesHDM.com, providing solutions for your comfort. Don't settle, get Gettles.
Hi, this is Greg at Verde Solar Power. You know, Arizona has lots of clean, renewable sunshine, and we want to help you take advantage of it with our quality solar installations, and we offer to beat any written offer on a residential solar electric system. So bring us your electric bill and let us show you how solar power will save you money. We're located conveniently here in the Verde Valley and are dedicated to helping the valley go solar. So remember, the energy solution comes up every morning.
So I just moved in with his family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
Orkin has pest control down to a science.
When your business chooses Orkin's Precision Protection Program, you get a tailored pest control program for your specific industry and environment.
Your business can benefit from over a century of experience, training, and scientific knowledge that define the Orkin man.
Maximum protection, minimum exposure, backed by one of the industry's most comprehensive guarantees.
Choose your locally owned and operated Northern Arizona Orkin and get more than an exterminator. Get an expert.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. I'd like to thank you for joining us here. On today's show, we're talking heat-related illness. My guest over the phone today is Prescott Fire Spokesman Conrad Jackson. We have talked a lot about what you can do to prevent a heat-related illness. I know that some of the COVID-19 restrictions are starting to be lifted, so more people are going to go outside, and coincidentally enough, we're also starting to reach our summer weather, so it's going to get a lot hotter outside. We talked about humans, but there are other creatures that enjoy hanging out with humans, pets. A lot of people do leave their pets in their cars. I know that's something that we will touch upon, but people also leave their pets outside. So what can we do to make sure our pets are safe from a heat-related illness?
Well, a lot of them are no-brainers. We need to be making sure that we're affording them with shade and lots of water, because they're going to need it. They don't perspire like us, so they're going to be panting, and they're going to be losing water that way. So we make sure that, give them those kinds of creature comforts. But we also need to pay attention, kind of like we talked about with activity levels for folks, our furry friends. Also, we need to be cognizant of, have they been a super active pet over the winter and they're ready to go be active, or basically are they in shape to go do it, and think about their ability to keep cool. So where we have a pet that we would normally be super active with, let's take it easy on them. Give them, don't over-exercise them. Don't be taking them out and making them do stuff in the heat of the day. So we try to, just like we do for the humans, in the cooler mornings or the cooler evenings is a good way to go. And then, there's lots of different thoughts on it, but if we can let the critters be indoors in our home where the air conditioning is available, they appreciate that as well. And we definitely don't want to be leaving them in the cars. A car can exceed 140 degrees in a matter of minutes. Even with the windows cracked a little bit, it's really inadequate airflow. So it's a really torturous thing to do to a pet. Let's see, here in Arizona, really, we also need to pay attention to, if we do take our dogs for a walk around the neighborhood, which I have lots of my neighbors doing that right now, is pay attention to how hot that asphalt's going to be. those little critters don't have the thickest pads in the world, and so they're at risk for that asphalt can get 160, 170 degrees. It can be really hard. Up here, it's a little bit better than down in the valley, but it's still pretty hard on them. If you've got a dog that's got like a pug, we'll call it a flat face. Keep in mind they're at higher risk. They can't pant as efficiently as dogs with snouts. So just be a little bit more mindful of that. And also, if you have an older pet, take it easy on them. Don't drag them around if they're not up for it. They're getting older. Be nice to them.
Well, Conrad, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to come on the show. You're always a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you taking the time to give us all these facts and information as the weather starts to turn to the hotter temperatures.
I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with you.
Well, that's going to do it here for Countywide. I'm your host, Philip Catafamo. I'd like to thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you again next time.